Hi everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of criminal profiling, looking at the myths associated with the field. If you didn't check out part 1, I really urge you to do that. We looked at the definition of criminal profiling, we looked at the first myth that I wanted to cover, which was specifically looking at how one man in history thought that looking at skulls can, figure out who's going to be a criminal. You can just see it as a child walks up to you if he has certain facial features. We also covered the beginning of the Mad Bomber case and how criminal profiling was used to perhaps solve that case. We'll see, and that's where we're going to be jumping in right now. We're going to see if James A. Brussel, a psychiatrist who worked on the case, was right in his criminal profile of the Mad Bomber. If that sounds interesting to you, sit back, relax, enjoy, and let's get right on into it. Okay, was James A. Brussel right in his criminal profile of the Mad Bomber? Well, surprisingly, kind of. He was pretty accurate on a lot of his predictions, however, some were not quite there, and we'll also get into why I'm not as impressed as a lot of people are by this case. The Mad Bomber ended up being a man by the name of George Metesky, and yes, he was a quaint, quiet, proper man living in Connecticut with his sisters. And so yes, Metesky did happen to live with female relatives who probably did remind him of his mother. However, Metesky was American born. However, his parents were immigrants from Lithuania, which is somewhat the right part of the world that they were thinking that the Mad Bomber was from. However, this is not a Slavic country, so he was wrong on that, and Metesky was born in America. And yes, most famously, upon arrest, George Metesky was actually found in his pajamas. However, when asked to get ready, get changed, get everything he needed to go to the police station, he did reappear wearing a double-breasted suit, buttoned. However, what I want to talk about is whether or not any of Brussel's predictions were actually striking. And so yes, he predicted that the Mad Bomber would be a skilled mechanic. However, the bombs were homemade, so isn't that implied? You have to be good at mechanics in order to build a bomb. So I don't think that's, that far to reach when describing this person. He also predicted that the Mad Bomber would be neat, quiet, proper, a great employee is one thing that he also described. And the thing is whoever was doing this, whoever the Mad Bomber was, had gotten away with it for 16 years, and they had his fingerprints on these homemade bombs. And so obviously they ran that in their little database and did not come up with a match, meaning that he had not already been caught and charged for a crime, which does seem to indicate that he would be a quiet, methodical, and proper man, given that he got away with placing bombs around New York City, the city that never sleeps, for 16 years. He's not going to look like your traditional criminal and probably isn't going to be suspicious in any way. And similar to pretty much every other serial killer or serial offender's profile, he was predicted to be a loner, a sexually frustrated man who lived with some sort of female relative and was obsessed with his mother. How many times have we heard that? It's not striking, it's not different, it's not very specific. And so my point here is that James A. Brussel didn't really predict anything that everybody else wasn't already thinking. And he also didn't predict anything that actually led to the arrest of George Metesky. And we will see that this is a recurring problem with criminal profiling as a whole. And so was Brussel right? Sure, yes he was. But was Brussel helpful? That answer is a little bit more unclear. And so now we're gonna go right into the biggie. We're gonna go into criminal profiling and its use within the FBI. And I know this is one of the biggest areas of interest for many, for those that are interested in criminal psychology as a whole. However, unfortunately, it seems to be more popular than it is backed up by research. However, despite this lack of empirical data, the FBI still uses criminal profiling. It's still taught in Quantico, and it's still used to catch criminals or to try and catch criminals. However, how it differs from, its use in criminal minds is that it's rarely instrumental in leading to an arrest. And in criminal minds, it's often the profile that really helps them figure out who it is, look at their suspect list and figure out for sure that it's, suspect B because of this, and this, and how it perfectly matches the profile that they have created. However, the reality is that criminal profiles are often very, very vague, and because of this, it can help to narrow down your list of suspects, but it's not going to necessarily bring you suspects to put on your list. Profiling accuracy is also not very impressive when you look at the data, and profilers know this. The FBI does not think that profiles work 100% of the time, and because of that, you can't necessarily clear someone from a suspect list because they don't fit your profile. So it's not necessarily as helpful as it seems. Criminal profiling is also troubling in that it's based on research we have done with criminals who have already been caught, because that's the only way we have access to them. And because of this, we are fully neglecting the behaviors, the intentions, the motivations of the criminals who haven't been caught, the ones who have gotten away with it. And this may indicate that we're learning, that we're developing this technique from only a subset of the population. And really, we would be developing this theory based on the criminals who are less competent and honestly worse criminals than the ones that we are unable to study. There's no way of knowing if the person you're looking for, the person who committed the crime that you're in search of, there's no way of knowing whether they fit into the criminals we have already studied, the ones we seem to know how they act, or the ones that we don't even know about, the ones that we can't even be sure that they exist. Criminal profiling is also using psychology in a way that it shouldn't be used. Psychology is meant to describe a general trend, general behavior of a large population by looking at, the subset of individuals that you have within your study. It's going from specific to general, whereas criminal profiling seems to be doing the exact opposite. You're trying to describe a certain person from a general set of beliefs that we think come from the general population. And that's why Brussels actually called it reverse psychology. You're doing the opposite of what psychology is supposed to be doing. However, there's no way of knowing if the person you're searching for is actually the exception to the rule. And if that is the case, well then psychology doesn't help you here, because we're not looking at the exceptions. We're looking at the general behaviors of the general population, not the exception. And all of these reasons seem to point to the fact that criminal psychology isn't really a science, it isn't really based in fact, and it's more of a party trick or even a circus act than science. It's more of a pseudoscience. And I'm not saying that it can't be accurate, because often it is. And those are the cases that we hear about. We hear about all the times that criminal profiling has been accurate, like the case of the Mad Bomber. And we don't hear about all the times that criminal profilers were very wrong and very off. More times than not, criminal profiling isn't accurate, and that's what the research says. And even if it's accurate, it's almost never helpful in actually solving crimes and putting criminals behind bars. And so criminal profiling almost is a myth within criminal psychology. It can be used effectively, but there isn't the research that we really desperately want there to be. I want to be clear that I'm not saying that criminal psychology is a myth. And because that's not true, there are lots of aspects of forensic psychology that are essential to the way we function as a society, and that are also backed up by empirical data. However, I want to be clear that it's not as dramatized as it is on TV, and it definitely should not be as romanticized as it is. Forensic psychologists play an integral role in understanding criminal behavior and help many people with a criminal record get back onto their feet and reintegrate within society, and really help those people recognize that they are people first who have just committed a crime in the past, rather than identifying themselves as a criminal. And forensic psychology is a relatively new field. It isn't as old as, all the other aspects of psychology that we often talk about, and because it's new, it's readily evolving. And so perhaps with more research, we may be able to use criminal profiling in a more helpful way. However, I'm saying I don't think we're there yet. And where we are right now, criminal profiling is not as accurate or as useful as we want it to be. but that doesn't mean that we can't get there in the future. And I think criminal psychology is a really interesting field. It is something I wish I could do more research into, and the myths that I had covered in this video and the last are not reasons to give up on the field as a whole. This video is meant to provide you with the facts. It's meant for you to take those facts and then come up with your own opinions. And it's not meant to sway you into one camp or the other, because I personally do believe in criminal psychology. However, I do not believe that things like criminal typing, criminal profiling, or psychoanalysis are necessarily as helpful or as useful as the media or entertainment makes it out to be. And with that, I will wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I know criminal psychology is definitely an interesting field, so if you do have any more questions or you want me to cover maybe a psychological analysis of a specific case you have seen, comment it below and I will try to get right on that. Stay safe and stay happy, and I hope to see you again next Monday.